Good evening. I'd like to call the April 9th school committee meeting to order. The purpose of this meeting is to interview a candidate for superintendent. So,
You ready?
Yep.
You want to do that other spiel, or are you good to go?
forget which one with about the governor.
Yeah.
We're doing the Zoom, this format to keep with the governor's guidelines of social distancing.
Okay. Candidates coming in.
All right. All right. Hi, Jim.
Had to unmute my mic there.
Hi, Jim. I'm Janice Lindblom, the school committee chair. We met, seems like ages ago.
Seems like a long time ago.
So this format is similar to the first interview. We're gonna, first I'm gonna go around and introduce the other committee members, but then you can have we'll let you do an opening statement. Then we will ask questions, and then in closing, you can make a closing statement or you can ask your own questions.
Okay, sounds good.
So Janice Lindblom, school committee chair. Peter Gates.
Peter Gates, vice chair.
Nicole Grandolini.
Hello.
Hi.
Mike Hayes.
Hi, Mike.
Good evening, how are you?
Good.
And Mike Wong.
Hi, Jim. Nice to meet you.
You too.
All right, so at this time, if you'd like to make an opening statement.
Sure. Well, first, I'd like to say thank you very much for having me, and I'm very honored to be one of the finalists for this position. One of the questions that was asked in the subcommittee was why Scituate? And it was probably the easiest one to answer from the 17 questions that we got that night. Basically, I've known about Scituate for a long time. I grew up in Boston. I was there for the first 2 years of busing. And then, like a lot of families, we moved down to the South Shore. I moved to Halifax, which I had never heard of until we moved there. But going to Silver Lake Junior High and then Regional High School, we were in the old Colony League and played Scituate. So I was very familiar with Scituate. It had an excellent reputation. So that's kind of what I knew. Even before I was interested in education, I knew that Scituate had an excellent reputation. But then as I saw the position open up and I started to research it, I understood why it had such an excellent reputation. And doing the research, I wouldn't try to pretend to understand or know Scituate. You really have to live anywhere to understand it well. But what I found out was that the reputation was well earned. You know, I saw when I looked at the core values matched up with my core values. Your respect for students and wanting them to be part of the education process, the idea that you have to build long-term relationships, the idea that you need integrity and trust, and that all students can learn, and that it's the obligation of the school district to try to help every student become the best they can be and prepare them for, you know, as we say, the 21st century and beyond, and become good, productive global citizens. All of that, as I read your strategic plan and I saw that, I thought, this is a great match. This is the kind of school district I would want to be a part of. But then I saw, as I look even further, that you guys practice what you preach. When I see somebody like George Sullivan getting celebrated by the student body for, you know, retiring after 20 years, and the faces of the students and of George, you can see that you guys really practice that. And something else that drove it home, when I was looking at your, you were laying out, there was a report on the options for the elementary schools, which ones you wanted to do. And there was a line in there that said that stakeholders' voices weren't heard yet. And I'm always preaching that you need to hear from everybody before you make your decision. And so I knew that was consistent as well. And lastly, and Janice, I apologize because you've heard this already, but when I saw the quote, "We are crew," that's really what sealed it for me. It's not just appropriate because it's Scituate sailors, but the idea that everyone is working together towards a common shared goal. And I shared with the group when I met with them that I had read the book, The Boys in the Boat. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that book, but it's about the 1936 Olympic rowing team, the 8-man team with the coxswain, and what they went through to try to attain a gold medal at the 1936 Olympics. I won't spoil it for you, but they talk about something called swing, that all rowing crews try to attain something called swing, which is everybody is in sync and everyone's working and it feels effortless, but they are getting great results because they're all working together. And so that's what really did it for me. And I think, my opening statement is just that, I would love to come to work for a place that shares the same core values that I share.
All right, great, thank you. First up is Mike Hayes.
Well, thank you. Jim, I have the first question, and it's my opinion, most superior school systems have superior choral, instrument, and art as a major part of their curriculum. Do you agree with that statement? Scituate, especially in its middle and high schools, have superior choral, instrument, and art programs. How will you support the arts and make it grow in the Scituate school system?
Yeah, well, to answer the first part of the question, I absolutely agree with that. Whenever they start talking about STEM and the importance of STEM, and then they talk about adding the A to make it STEAM, you absolutely have to have the arts to have a well-rounded student, and not only a well-rounded student, but every student's different. They all have different intelligences and different strengths, and you need to give them the opportunity to explore that and find it. And some can do that through academics, some can do it through the arts, but you really need it all in order to make it work. It's funny, my current superintendent and I went to China a couple of years ago, and we wanted to try to set up a sister school so they could send students over to us and we could send students over there in an exchange program. But what we learned was that they do really well on standardized tests, but they struggle at the higher level learning skills, like creativity. They look to the United States as the model for producing students that are creative. And it's funny, while we're looking at them as the exemplar for how to do well on standardized tests, they're looking at us as the example of how to do well to create well-rounded individuals who can do well after school. So as far as how to support that, you absolutely have to have all opportunities. You advocate in the budget for it. You advocate for programs, for opportunities for those students to present it, to perform, to share their work. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. North Andover has an excellent program as well. And as much as possible, we bring the students to the school committee, so the school committee can not only hear and see, but show their appreciation. And we encourage trips to participate in the different competitions and any other opportunities that you could think of. But you need to promote the arts as a essential part of learning.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I have the next question. So the question is, why are you seeking the superintendency, and how do you see your particular skill set working effectively for us, and why do your skills match our needs?
Okay, so I've been in my current position for 11 years now and have felt I've been striving. My goal has been to be a superintendent. I certainly want to be a part of, and I think I can help make a difference in a school district. And I felt ready for about 5 or 6 years, but I wanted to go back to school and complete my doctorate in education, because I thought it was important, not only for my own background, but also I think it's important that those that you're working with have the confidence that you understand what you're doing and what they're doing. So that was important to me. So I went back, I got my doctorate and started looking. And like I said, it's very important that it's a good match between the district and the individual. And that's what I found, is that my core values and your core values match up very well. And so I think having that synchronicity provides me the opportunity to kind of enhance those strengths and those goals within the district, and keep them in the forefront as we're moving forward.
Thank you.
Great. Sorry, just one sec. I'm getting a couple texts here that people are having a hard time
Yeah.
getting on to the video or calling in. So I don't know
Yeah.
if that's why we don't have too many folks here. But we're on, so.
Yeah, I don't have anybody sitting in the waiting room.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. It's the other folks, as is a public meeting, the other folks, I'm getting notifications they can't get in. One of them is my wife, so.
Yeah. The wrong code, the wrong code must have been listed, but the code that's published is supposedly incorrect. I passed on one to somebody, and now we have 7 in, so one of them worked. But I don't know how to communicate the actual working code to anybody, because they're not going to hear it because they're not in.
Okay, hold on.
I don't have a solution.
Yeah, everyone's saying meeting's not started. Hold on.
They're not using the one from Tuesday, are they?
I think
they
so.
are.
Yeah.
So each meeting has its own separate identity.
Right.
I think we only send out one agenda. I think.
The phone number should be the same though.
Same phone number, it's just a different code. I have the updated code, but I don't know how to share it with those that can't get in. Unless we post it.
Oh, right, different meeting code, that's right.
I can post.
You know what?
Something.
I'm gonna go to, which Scituate page should I go to? Scituate Connect?
How dare you?
Monthly.
Yeah.
Scituate Monthly?
Yeah.
All right, I'll post it to Scituate Monthly.
Okay.
I assume that's a problem. I don't know. I don't.
Yeah, because
recall what the
there is a
was.
code that worked. I can post it in Scituate Moms or whatever. Although everybody's in Scituate Monthly. That probably just covers everything.
So should we continue or should we wait?
It'll be taped. We're taping it, so
Continue.
I mean,
Sorry
you're not
about
gonna be able to see it.
Jim, sorry about that. It just
That's okay.
That's all right.
welcome
We've
to
had
Scituate.
the same difficulties in our meetings.
All right, good. So we apologize to those out
We're
there
just
trying to get in.
testing. Yeah, we're testing your ability to go with this flow.
Yeah, here we go. Leads right into my question. Hopefully this comes across correctly. The question is, after resolving a challenging situation in a prior job, what strategies did you use to heal any relationships that were strained throughout that process?
Yeah. So one of my tenets is definitely maintaining good relationships and thinking that every relationship is a long-term relationship. So there are plenty of times when I've had to kind of sacrifice the battle in order to maintain that relationship for a greater good at the end. Just a good example, I guess, would be this year. We have had 8 years in a row of consensus budgets where the selectmen, the town manager, the superintendent, the school committee all agreed on the budget number. That was in danger this year. We have identified, we did a 5-year plan this year for the budget. And so we've laid out all that's needed over the next 5 years. And this year, our number was 1% more than what the town manager was indicating we were going to get. We put forward our best case. We got support from the finance committee. We got support from the school committee. And so some of the discussions that we had with the town manager and her staff were contentious, but we stayed with it. We made our case and we did it, I think, respectfully. And so there was a point where people were upset about it, but we just continued to be professional about it and provide the data and the information. And as opportunities came up after that, we continued to work with them the way we always had. And it just, I think if you maintain a relationship and stay true to that, build that trust, you can disagree. I don't know if you guys are going to ask this, but one of the things that, how I operate is that we can disagree. You come in the office and we close the door, we can have it out and yell at each other and disagree completely. But once a decision is made and we open that door, we're a consensus front after that. And so building up that relationship allows you to get through those periods where you might disagree, knowing that in the past you've worked it out and you'll work it out again.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jim, so as the next question, so kind of going along the same lines, in your first year as superintendent, you will be responsible for completing contract negotiations with all 6 of our unions. What has been your approach to contract negotiations throughout your career, and how will that define your approach if you become superintendent in Scituate?
Yeah, so I've certainly negotiated a lot of contracts when I was in Nashua, and then the 11 years I've been here, I've always been a part of the teachers. The teachers are always different, or at least I would imagine they're the same in Scituate, but in most districts, the superintendent and 1 or 2 school committee members are part of the negotiating team and somebody in my position. But for all the other groups, you call them paraprofessionals, we call them teaching assistants, the food service employees, the custodians, the administrative assistants. For all the other groups, I'm the lead negotiator. And my style, it's interesting because this is the 3rd contract we've negotiated with the teachers. We're currently doing it now, where we've used the interest-based bargaining method, which is very collaborative. And it fit right in because that's how I negotiate anyway. It's about identifying, both sides identify the interests in an issue and figure out what works best for everybody. And you do it together instead of that kind of back and forth where only the attorneys are talking and everybody else, if they want to talk, we have to have a caucus. So that's not my style. My style is very collaborative, and it's been very effective. I can give you an example. The last negotiation we had with the teaching assistants began very contentious. They changed their leadership and they came in saying it was going to be different. A new sheriff was in town. And it started out very contentious, and by the end, it was very collaborative. And we're now into the next contract, and negotiations are going so much better because we had established that relationship in the last contract and are continuing it with this one.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Jim, I have the next question. Not all students choose college after graduation. What programs would you develop for those students that would help them be successful after graduating from high school?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was working on my dissertation, I discovered something that I wasn't aware of prior to that. And it was we're always talking about the percentage of our graduating seniors who go off to 2- and 4-year colleges. And we're always proud of that being a high number. But when I was doing my dissertation, it was about parental expectations. And I interviewed a lot of parents for it. And one of the common themes was that people are starting to do the cost-benefit analysis of college and saying maybe not, it might not be the right thing for my child, depending on where they are. They might not want to go or feel they need to go now, or they might have an interest that they just want to do a trade or whatever else it might be. They want to take a year off and go to Europe. But in order to, I think one of the things that we've talked about, and in particular I've talked about with our some of the businesses in town, is setting up an opportunity for students to interact more with the community, especially businesses in the community, to get an understanding of what they need in order to go out into the workforce if they're not going into college. What kind of experience do they need to develop, and can they start to get those relationships started and build on those? So I think it's making those connections for the students, and it's something that you guys are big on, the project-based learning, and that would be an opportunity as well, is in those project-based learning is getting some outside expertise, so to speak, and start to build those connections in that way as well. So I think that's the best way to do it, is to start to make those connections and give students the opportunity to do so, and to learn what's out there. The funniest thing when you listen to kind of commencement speeches, and you think about the students sitting out there listening to that commencement speech, they have no idea what's coming. Their lives have been controlled for their whole lives up to that point, and now they're just going out into the world and they don't know what to expect at all. So the more we can make them aware of what's out there and what's going to be expected of them, the better off they're going to be.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, it's Mike Hayes again, and I'm up. Scituate's always been very concerned with the emotional well-being of our students, their families, and our staff, especially now in this uncharted waters of coronavirus, which appears it's going to be the new normal for a couple of years. Can you talk about your experience and your opinions on how, as an educator, you can enhance the emotional well-being of those people?
Yeah, it's interesting. All school districts are dealing with it, and we're no exception. So in order for the student to learn, they have to be ready to learn. And for them to be ready to learn, we have to take care of their social emotional issues. And for us, it was kind of a chicken or the egg kind of conversation, where we only had so many resources, and we had to decide, are we going to bring in a director of social emotional learning, or are we going to get supports for the schools and the principals to provide some of those services that are needed at the schools in order to prepare our students for the classroom and for learning? Not the current superintendent, the superintendent before felt that it was more important to start at the top and kind of work down. Personally, after a couple of years of that, I wished we had done it the other way and provided kind of boots on the ground, so to speak, and provided some supports at our schools. And we're correcting that, because this year's budget conversations with the principals identified specifically that's where we need to put our funds, are the supports, the social emotional, the adjustment counselors, the EL tutors, things like that, to help prepare our students to have them ready to learn. So I think that's the answer, is that you have to make sure and advocate for the supports that are necessary to prepare our students for learning.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us about your experience with hiring teachers and other school personnel And what are some of the ways that you have raised the confidence of the people that you work with? And how did you do that?
So one of the things we developed probably like 3 or 4 years ago now, was a process for hiring new teachers. Obviously, after the student, the teacher is the most important person in the district, and you want to make sure you have excellent teachers. And so what we did was we put in place a process where they have to do a model lesson for us. So whoever is on the team, when each principal puts together a team in a central office, we take turns on different teams being part of those. And it includes other teachers in that particular school as well. And so we're the students, and they model their teaching for us. And it's really worked out well to see them in action and to understand. And then, we're actually active students, and we ask questions and challenge them a little bit and give them situations to deal with. And it's worked out well. And there's still times when we don't make the right decision, but it's worked out better than it had been. And so we've actually been asked to share that with other districts, and they've been doing that as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jim, next question for you is, if you were to be hired as our next superintendent, what do you anticipate will be the biggest challenges for you in the first 30 days, 6 months, and 12-month timeframes?
It's funny. It was going to be one of my questions for you. But I guess for the biggest challenge is just you're new to the community, you're new to the district, and I'm a firm believer that you don't come in thinking you have all the answers, and to the point where I like to think that I come up with good ideas, but for me, the idea isn't the answer. The idea is the beginning of the conversation. And you might end up, when you do come up with your solution, it could be completely different from the original idea, but it just gets the conversation going. So the biggest challenge would be just getting to know the players in the district, getting around. I think it's absolutely critical that the superintendent gets around, gets to different events, is seen in the schools, interacts with all of the stakeholders in the community, does the entry plan. Obviously coming in, that's going to be critical in getting information about what are the strengths that need to be enhanced, and what are the issues that might need to be addressed. What are the priorities? That's critical to know. So I guess just coming in and learning all of that and getting caught up to speed as quick as possible.
Can you give a little bit more detail? What do you think short-term goal versus longer-term goal? Obviously, getting to know the folks is the short-term struggle. What do you think, out over 12 months would be your challenge once you get to know some of the folks?
Yeah, so then it's, the intent would be to develop the entry plan and then report out on the entry plan. And in that entry plan, you would have identified through the feedback the main priorities and the main issues. So then moving forward, it's getting consensus that those are the issues and the direction that we want to go in, and it's getting support from the different stakeholders in moving in that direction. So for the 12 months, from what I have gathered, there's the MSBA application that you have in. There's certainly the MCAS scores are good, but there's always room for improvement. There's a few areas where it's probably much like ours when we have our school committee meeting each year, where the schools are reporting out on their MCAS scores. We have them identify the areas that were good and then the areas that need some work. And looking at Scituate, you can see that, achievement scores are good, but the growth was kind of lower as far as attaining some of the goals that were set, that they weren't all met. And at the high school, achievement and growth are both good, but the math scores for some reason, and it's funny because it changes from one year to the next. So it's just a matter of identifying where you're going to put your efforts and gain support and buy-in for that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jim, so the next question. In your mind, what is your ideal role of the superintendent, administration, and school committee? And what is your ideal relationship with the school committee and other interest groups such as course or shore within Scituate? I know you kind of touched on this with an earlier question.
So what was the last part
you
of
want to
that?
expand on?
When you said
The second part was what is your ideal relationship with the school committee and other interest groups such as course or shore within Scituate?
Mm-hmm. So specific to the school committee, you have the administrative and you have the policy aspects, but I believe it's absolutely critical that there's a good working relationship between the superintendent and the school committee. The job of the superintendent is to make sure the school committee is as informed as they possibly can be. So that's the data for whatever decisions being made. I thought the report that was done for the 6 options on the schools was excellent. I thought that was a great example of what should be provided in order to make an informed decision. The superintendent, and it's not only the data, but it's getting the school committee to know what's going on in the district, opportunities to see. You talked earlier about the arts, whether it's arts or athletics or academics. You want to create opportunities for the school committee to see the student work and have them, my favorite school committee meetings have been when we've gone to different schools and have the students show. We had at an elementary school, we had the students show how Lucy Calkins has improved their writing and how, and it was amazing to hear students talking about their developing their own voice in their writing. Or another elementary school where we went and they were talking about STEAM in the media centers, what we used to call libraries, and they're doing the programming their robots, or they're working on green screen. So you have to, as a superintendent, you have to provide those opportunities for the school committee. Another one is helping them to maintain good relationships with, you talked about the other groups. You have to be the intermediary between those to ensure that the relationships are maintained and that everybody understands what's going on. And most importantly, as a school committee member, you never, well, as a superintendent, you want to make sure there are never any surprises for the school committee. It's the worst thing that can happen. And it's not just school committees, but everybody. It's the same when I'm dealing with unions, where my first advice to anybody who comes to me and says, oh, should I do this? It's always, did you talk to the leaders and get their feedback? And because they don't want to hear from somebody else that you did it, and then they're questioning whether it should have been done or not. If they already know about it, then it's going to be a lot smoother. So as a school committee, you should know everything that's going on. And if somebody comes to you and asks you a question, you should be able to say, oh yeah, I know about that, and here's why. What else? So yeah, I guess that's it.
Okay, I have a next question. Having done research on Scituate Public Schools, would you develop your own 5-year plan or build off the one that we currently have, and why?
Well, I had gone to school for, I had gone back to school for my MBA. And in the MBA program, you spend most of your time doing case studies of organizations and what works and what doesn't work. And what almost never worked was when an organization tried to model themselves after somebody else. They'd see Toyota or 3M or IBM or GE, and they'd say, we're going to be just like them. And it would fail miserably because that they weren't them. What you have to do is you have to find out who you are, what your strengths are, and build on those and work with that. And so toward that end, I certainly would not come in and try to develop a whole new plan. Organizations tend to rail against change and especially drastic change. And again, whatever plan is in place right now, I've seen the strategic plan, it's very good, has been developed over years and has been done by people who understand what Scituate needs. So I certainly want to add a fresh set of eyes and a fresh perspective, but I don't think it's helpful to come in and try to change things that drastically.
Great, thank you.
Jim, it's Mike Hayes again, and I'm up next. And Scituate's been very lucky in the last number of years through hard work by teachers and curriculum leaders to get big grants regarding K through 12 health, wellness, and physical wellness. And so I was curious as to your experience in that and what your general philosophy is on the physical health and welfare of our kids, and including high school athletics.
Mm-hmm. So it goes back to a couple of different things we've talked about already. One being students being ready to learn, and certainly health is absolutely critical in that regard. So we have an excellent director of nursing who has also gotten us some grants through the years that have really enhanced our nursing staff, and they do a great job of ensuring that our students, one of the things that they really pride themselves on is decreasing the number of repeat visits to the nursing office through the year. And they do an excellent job at it. And the grant funds have allowed us to provide enough, sufficient staff to ensure that the students' needs are met. And then as far as athletics, I'm a huge proponent of athletics. I actually attended Northeastern on a baseball scholarship. So I've always been involved in athletics. And I think that it goes back to the other thing we talked about with regards to a well-rounded student. There are so many things that our students learn besides the time in the classroom. And we talked about the arts and how important that is, but understanding health and fitness is critical. And then the lessons that are learned participating in sports are lifelong lessons that you carry with you. I know I have, you understand what it is to be part of a team, to sacrifice, to develop relationships, to make sure you're somebody that can be counted on. So I think they all play a part in ensuring that we have well-rounded students who find their niche and are ready to learn.
One of the things that I know the vast majority of our coaches, they want, like you, well-rounded students, but they insist that the student athletes in Scituate strive to be the best students in Scituate and the best individuals in Scituate, or they're not going to participate. So we're very proud of that for the most part.
I can share with you, and this is true, I can remember in the old Colony League, there were certain teams that you didn't want to play because you knew it was going to be rough. and they were going to talk to you during the game. And I can tell you, Scituate was not one of those, even back then. This was a long time ago. But I never did not look forward to playing Scituate.
Well, we know who the talkers are. They're still the talkers.
I was going to say that too. It's still us.
Anyway, thank you.
Yeah.
So heading into questions about budgeting, I know different questions have touched on that a little bit, but can you describe your experience with managing a school budget, and how do we ensure that we're fiscally responsible with our resources, transparent in our process, and equitable across all schools?
Yeah, so the absolutely most important part of developing a budget, and we do it, I'm sure a lot of districts do, we do it very similar to how you do it, is that we first determine what will level services cost us. And it's amazing how consistent it has been in North Andover over the years. That's about 3%. I think it was a little more for you guys when I was looking at the budget numbers. But we're right around 3%. And that's maintaining all the staff we have, anticipating some inflation in our vendors, contracted services, and then whatever is left, if we think we're going to get 4% in a year, now we have 1% to work with. And for us, that's between $450,000 and $500,000. So now it's meeting with the principals, and the principals start out with talking to their staff and identifying needs at the building level. And then the principals all come together from each level to discuss and kind of set the priorities. So they make the case for what they need, and then we associate a cost with that, and then we have that list, and the group decides which priorities are going to be put forward. It's not the superintendent, ultimately it is, but it's in these discussions with the principals, and the group sets the priorities and determines which ones are going to try to be addressed in that given year. As far as transparency goes, we provide everybody with all the line items in the budget and a description of what's being done. And one thing that we started a couple of years ago was tying each of the what we call the new initiatives to an initiative from the strategic plan. So we have a column to the right of our budget request after we explain what it is that identifies which initiative in the strategic plan that request is addressing.
Thank you.
So I'm actually going to ask a question along those lines right now. So as part of our budget, Scituate charges families a number of fees for services that are offered by the district. So full-day kindergarten, riding the bus, athletics, are some of the fees that we charge. What is your approach towards fees? And from a budget standpoint, how would you approach any attempt to either cut down or eliminate the fees that we're charging?
Well, I don't know how this will go over, but if it was up to me, we wouldn't be charging fees. We just charge all the same fees that you do. I have to say we actually stopped the kindergarten a few years ago. I think it's about 6 years ago now. I had attended a conference and talking to some other districts, found out that they were changing from half-day kindergarten to full-day kindergarten. And that was made possible because of the increase in Chapter 70 that would result. Back when we were doing it, a half-day student would get $3,500 for a town in Chapter 70 money, and a full day would be $7,000. The amount that our Chapter 70 would increase in a given year would easily offset the amount we were collecting in half-day tuition. The only challenge was that there's a 1 year lag in that increase to Chapter 70 funding. So you'd be foregoing that tuition for a year without any offset until the following year, and then it would continue from there on out. I was able to convince first the superintendent and then the town manager to support it. And it was probably about a 2.5-year period that it was a payback period of 2.5 years. And then we've actually benefited financially going forward. But more importantly, the impact of having our students, our kindergarten students, for a full day rather than a half day has been tremendous. Getting them that, that early and getting them acclimated to full day of school and working on the skills that they need to work on has proven essential. As far as, so we were able to remove that fee. We haven't been successful in removing other fees just because, I don't know if you're aware of this, but North Andover is in the bottom 3% in per pupil spending, which surprises a lot of people. But we don't have a lot of ability to address those kind of things that we'd like to do as far as like fees. We rely on the fees. So it's tough. I mean, the athletic fees, we're concerned about the fact that there could be students who aren't participating simply because of the fee. And that would be terrible. So we do have some programs for those who might not be able to afford it, but then you're concerned about those who might be embarrassed to avail themselves of it and not let you know and just say, I'm not going to play. Whenever possible, I would say I would try to find ways to mitigate, minimize, eliminate fees that students pay.
Well, someone who's paying for full day kindergarten and the bus next year, I completely agree with you there.
Thanks.
But thank you for your answer.
You're welcome.
All right, Jim, I have the next question. In your current role, who has been the most impactful person in terms of helping you achieve that success?
In my current role,
I'll give you a past role too. Just someone who was important to your success as administrator.
and it doesn't have to be now. It can be.
No, I'll let you go past a different, let you go back.
Yeah, I would have to say the superintendent when I was in Nashua and who actually got the job in North Andover and asked me to come with him from Nashua to North Andover. He, for whatever reason, felt that I was a good sounding board. And so I got to, in all honesty, my schedule every day would get hijacked. I would end up in the superintendent's office for pretty much the whole day. But it gave me the opportunity to be a part of all of the daily decisions that were being made in part of the discussion and part of the, giving ideas and helping to make that decision. And it really got me to understand how school districts work and what goes into making that decision and communicating and involving other groups. I think the best example was we had an Ebola situation at one point, and getting the health department and getting the principals and getting community leaders and getting everybody involved in the response and drafting the communications that were going out to assure people. I have to say that was the most influential for me.
Okay, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, because I snuck in the last time I get to ask the next question. So Scituate takes a lot of pride as a community in its school system. And I think we saw that earlier tonight when people were trying to get in and couldn't get into the call. And now we have 20 some odd people from the town listening into this discussion. How would you build public support as a new superintendent? And how would this interaction drive your approach to proposing new ideas or changes to the district?
Yeah, I think you build support through inclusion. You're going to do that through the entry plan. You're going to get feedback, but I think it has to be, people have to see that they're being heard. And so it's not just, listening. It's also, when you can, acting on things that are requested or things that are recommended. And so building community support is all about including them. It's meeting with the PTO presidents. It's having when the PTO has a meeting at the school, attending those and getting feedback, and then people seeing their ideas come to fruition is critical in establishing that trust that they're being heard, they're being listened to. So as far as building that kind of community support, it's getting out there and including them in the process.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have the next question. Describe a difficult situation you were once in. What did you learn from it? Did you come to a different conclusion or make a different decision?
The easiest one for me is to identify a difficult situation. When I left Nashua, it was a tough decision for me. I really enjoyed working for the superintendent who was coming from Nashua to North Andover. I wasn't sure I wanted to go, but then I finally decided to. And then after we had left and they were closing out the books, there was a deficit in the Nashua budget. So they were trying to figure out what had happened, and part of it was political. The deficit, Nashua was a good-sized district, and the deficit was $3.3 million. 1.3 of that was what New Hampshire calls catastrophic aid and what in Massachusetts calls circuit breaker funding. So it was just a matter of the Board of Aldermen hadn't yet voted to accept that money, which they eventually did. The other part of it was the fact that the SPED department was kind of independent from the rest of us, and it was large, out of district was large, and each year prior to that, they had returned or underspent in their budget about $1 million. Well, that year they overspent by $1 million. So the tough part for me was the superintendent said, I'm not going back. And I said, I have to go back. I have to go back and help them identify what the problem was and take responsibility for it. So what I learned was I'm certainly one who will take responsibility for my actions. And going forward, what I learned was, one, you need to have something in place to protect against, especially the uncertainties. In out-of-district tuitions is a big one. From one year to the next, we go in and you think you've identified all the students and you think you have it, and then you get a move in, or you get a student that was day school, now they're residential. So it can go up quick. So a couple of things that I did here in North Andover was, one, I meet with the special education director every 2 weeks to review the out-of-district tuitions. And so we have a very good handle on that. And then the second thing was that I promoted and was able to get approval for a special education stabilization fund, which has helped tremendously. I can't tell you the relief, because what happens is that money has to come from somewhere, and you end up, the popular saying, robbing Peter to pay Paul, when those unanticipated expenses occur. So by setting that up, we know that as long as we can show these were unanticipated, then at town hall, they move the money from the stabilization fund into the budget, and those costs are covered. So yeah, it was a hard lesson, but it was certainly one that I learned from, and it paid off.
That's something we're trying to put in place in Scituate right now.
I saw that, yeah. I saw a couple of different things. One was the stabilization fund, and then you also have a school project that's going on. That was something else that we've dealt with.
Thanks.
Jim, I think I'm next, and this isn't a formal question, but probably going to be a follow-up for someone else's. 15 years ago, I was very fortunate to work on a program with a very involved teacher regarding children who suffer in silence. Specifically, we have a very proud association with Metco and an original Metco town, and but of course there are problems in with diverse groups of people and getting to know each other and working through issues, and whether they're racial, sexual orientation, bullying, all those types of issues where kids struggle. And so the group that has now become known as Allies Not Bystanders, we feel after 15 years it's a model, and it's totally run now by students and who go to the various high school students who go to the middle school and the elementary schools, as well as and have a presentation with each and every class in the high school. So can you talk about your feelings on that type of initiative? And I mean, Scituate demographically is a lot like North Attleboro. And what have you worked on in those regards?
Yeah, so I certainly, it's near and dear to me because I've lived it. One thing I learned during busing in Boston was, well, I was confused. I was confused as to what the problem was because parents were angry about what was going on. And when we went to school, we made friends with everybody and they seemed normal. You know, it was confusing to a kid. And what it said to me was that if you just bring people together and they start to learn that they're the same. It's funny when I talked about going to China, you know, you have this impression that it's going to be completely different, but the people we spent time with, they had the same concerns, the same, you know, the same love of family. And you at the core, people are the same. And the more that you can get them to see that, the better opportunity you're going to have that they're going to get along. So I certainly believe that. And what we've done, and similar to that, I think, what we've done in North Andover is put in place from preschool all the way through 12th grade. Our students are drilled on what we call RAISE, and it's RAISE, respect, achievement, inclusion, service, and empathy. And it's part of our curriculum in our advisories. And as much as possible, the teachers will use examples and how does that apply to the RAISE values that we've talked about and that you've learned. So I think as it has to be a driving force with the students and continuously right at the forefront and people's attention brought to it.
Right, and RAISE is a big component of our Allies Not Bystanders program. So, and it works. It works.
Yep.
Thank you.
So next question, how will you facilitate the flow of ideas and critical feedback from parents and other citizens back to the district? Kind of an added piece thinking about social media and how connected we are and the way that information flows very quickly these days and what's accurate and inaccurate. How do you flush that out and make sure that you're communicating your most accurate message to the district and stakeholders?
Yeah, well, the biggest challenge is what do you respond to and what don't you respond to? I don't know if you have Scituate moms in Scituate, but we have North Andover moms in North Andover, and there's a lot of misinformation that goes on that Facebook page. And we find that it's not productive at all to respond to that. as much as possible. You know, we try to keep our website up to date, and I've seen yours obviously, and it's very good. We have a webmaster that does an excellent job of that. The superintendent and the high school principal and the athletic director all have Twitter and are constantly tweeting out, positive messages going to the chorus or the band competition or a sporting event. But yeah, it comes down to, we use Messenger for getting, the principals do it more than the superintendent does, but the superintendent will do it every once in a while as well. But it's about providing as much information as possible and keeping it active and new, the worst thing that can happen is your website becomes stale and people to go there and read something that happened 3 weeks ago, and there's been 4 or 5 other things that have happened since then, and it's not up there. So, it's just a matter of not, it's good to know. We get a lot of people who tell us, do you know what's on North Andover Moms, what they're talking about? And it will inform us as to where we might be dropping the ball on our communication, but we're not going to do it directly on that Facebook page. So we try to take that information and have it be useful. But our message is always, pushed out and trying to address all the issues that are out there.
Oh, thanks. Similar here as well.
Yeah, go ahead and say it. There is a Scituate Moms Facebook page. It's called Scituate Moms.
Several Scituate Moms listeners right now, so.
I'm sure.
Myself included.
Yeah, and it can be very helpful, but at the same time, you've got a lot of different personalities on there, and a lot of times people are reacting to misinformation. So, it's not the forum for having that conversation.
Right. I just have a quick follow-up to Jim. You said that you have a webmaster. What are the webmaster of your site? Do they have another role within the district, or I can't assume that's their only job? But are they?
They have another job, but not in the district.
So you hire someone to run the website. Correct.
It used to be a stipend paid to one of our high school teachers, and it's now somebody from outside who does that kind of work, and we're just one contract for them.
Okay. All right. Thanks. In my previous question, I asked you for an example of or someone that helped you succeed in your prior jobs, and you referenced your superintendent. If you were to be the superintendent here, who will you lean on to ensure your success?
Wow, everybody. So yeah, that's a tough one to answer. I mean, I'm very inclusive in my leadership style, and so I would lean on everyone from the assistant superintendent, the business manager, the special education director. I'm a firm believer that, and teachers and custodians, that everybody knows their job better than I do. And I'm there to advocate for them, facilitate their job, get their ideas if we're looking for some solutions, get their input. But yeah, I would have a hard time picking one specific person. I think that it's we are crew. So I would think that I would be relying on everybody.
Would you feel comfortable in reaching out to your current superintendent or participating in some sort of mentorship program?
Oh, well, I don't even have a choice on that. The Massachusetts Superintendent Association provides you all superintendents with a mentor. So I've met the ones who have mentored. I'm now on my 4th superintendent, here in North Andover. So I've met 4 mentors. But yeah, by all means, I would welcome the opportunity to have somebody like that available who has been through it and seen, not all, no one's seen all, but who's seen a lot and can help you navigate through that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Jim, as I'm sure you've seen, we have 6 schools in the district, 4 different elementary schools, neighborhood schools across the town. And one of the things that we hear often as a school committee is, one school is doing something different than another in terms of either how they're teaching the curriculum or an event that they do that other schools don't also do. So my question for you is, how would you align the district curriculum both horizontally and vertically? And then how would you ensure that the district's curriculum is aligned with state and national standards?
Yeah, so it's certainly something that we deal with. With regards to the consistency, one of the things that we've tried to do is provide professional development opportunities. Collaboration time has been absolutely one of our main efforts at our schools. And in that collaboration time, we use curriculum coaches. And the curriculum coaches are meeting with the teams at the schools to try to ensure that the curriculum is consistent across the grades. Another thing that we do is we have what we call instructional rounds, where people from around the district, central office leadership team, principals from other schools, and we even expanded it to include teachers from other schools. But we will visit a school and the principal will identify the areas that they want us to focus on, whether it's how much student voice is being heard in that class, or how's engagement in that class, or is the teacher allowing for student discourse in the class, and then curriculum. So when we started rolling out Lucy Calkins and Eureka Math, we would focus on, is there consistency not only from one school to another, but from one teacher to another, in the different classrooms.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of different ways you can try to monitor. And I lost my thought on that one. But as far as the elementary schools, we try to have the curriculum coaches as involved as possible in those discussions with the teams, the teams, and we do it at the elementary level, we do it by grade level. And so they're going and they're seeing what one school is doing, and then they can bring over to another school and say, well, this is working well and this isn't working well, but they can also start to synchronize what's going on at the different schools. And then so obviously they're responsible for ensuring the state standards are being part of the curriculum and being taught.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Jim, I have the last question. Sorry. How would you address the lack of diversity in Scituate Public Schools?
We've struggled with that as well, and there are certain things that we have been trying to do, and that's like it's developing partnerships. We're right next to Lawrence, and so we've talked to them. We started some conversations with them about how we might be able to have a exchange of staff, where if somebody wants to go to Lawrence for a year and teach, and when somebody can come from Lawrence to come over to North Andover and teach, and maybe hopefully they find that they like it here and could stay. So there are different things that we've talked about, but we haven't had a lot of success yet on that one. It's certainly something that we strive for, and it's part of our strategic plan every time, but we haven't had a lot of success yet, and we're hopeful that one might actually help us, because it's important that you are, that the staff is diverse. And it's funny, just as a personal note, my wife and I raised our children. We have 5 kids. They've all now graduated college, but when they were in school and they were, going up through the grades, we lived in Manchester, New Hampshire. And Manchester, New Hampshire is probably the most diverse city in New Hampshire. And the high school that they were going to is Central High School in Manchester, very diverse. And there were parents who were reluctant to send their children to Central High School. And they would ask us, are we going to, my wife and I? And we say, of course we are. That's what the world is. So why wouldn't we want them to go there? So as I said, in other responses, it's very important to me. And it's certainly something that I would make an effort in trying to do something about.
Okay, thank you. I would like to offer, if anybody else has one last question, they would like to.
I have one, a quick one, Jim. Our next superintendent is going to be a rookie in Scituate, and we have a new police chief in Scituate, just hired. What would your strategy be to get together with him and in this age of uncertainty and violence in schools and in other places?
Yeah, so it's absolutely a critical relationship. We have excellent relationships with the town manager, with the police chief, with the fire chief, with the DPW director. We have, over the last few years, opened up our schools for the police to come in and train in the schools during vacation weeks or during the summer. They've come in and presented to the school committee, and we are now in the ALICE program. And so it's an absolutely critical relationship that you have to keep and maintain. We have resource officers that develop relationships with our kids, and it's absolutely vital that you have that relationship. And it's not difficult to build. They want the same things we want. They want to keep our kids safe, and they want them not only safe but to feel safe. And so they work towards that, and we're happy to help.
Great, thank you.
Janice, should we go on and ask some of those additional questions?
Yeah, if you wanted one of those questions.
I will, just kind of a fun one. But Jim, it's kind of twofold. It's kind of twofold. Number one is, do you think that in uncertain weather events, school should be canceled the night before or the morning of? And secondly, have you ever lived, I think you said you lived in Halifax. That's not, we don't consider that to be quite South Shore, but you will give that to you. Have you ever lived near the ocean so as to understand some of the challenges a seaside community has relative to storms?
Well, I grew up in Boston, which doesn't quite see the same impact from storms as Scituate or Gloucester or areas like that do. I haven't lived on the ocean, although I can tell you that my wife wants to live on the ocean. So I can't answer that. I can tell you as far as the night before or the morning of. I used to be a morning of person. I wanted to wait to see how things really played out. That has become more difficult over the last few years to have that position, because basically what happens is all of the superintendents get on the phone with each other, trying to decide, all right, what's the forecast? What's it going to be? When's it going to hit? And it's become, and then once one starts to go, the dominoes just fall and everybody else goes. But besides that, there's definitely a human element benefit to the night before. where people now know they can plan accordingly and to go from there. But it's just, I'm laughing because I know what happens is if you make the call the night before, you pray that it snows.
Yeah.
So that you're proven right. And I also know that no matter what decision you make, you're going to be told it was wrong.
Yep, definitely. Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? If you were to be offered the position, would your wife get her wish to live by the ocean? I know that's a very, I know that drive because I'm a North Shore girl,
No,
so I know that commute very
trust me,
well.
I would not be making the drive. You know, as I said, I've been planning this for a while now. And in doing so, once my youngest finished college, I can just remember, it's funny, 5 kids. My youngest went off to college, and I just remember looking around my house and saying, I can't remember the last time I was the only one in my house. And then I realized how big my house was for just the 2 of us. So knowing that I was going to be applying for a superintendent position, I wanted to be a superintendent, we sold the house and we've been renting for the last 1.5 years now, just over the border in an old mill building. It's great. It's right on the Merrimack River. But with the intent of, because it's absolutely critical that the superintendent be part of the community. So our intent is definitely to live, if I got the job there, to live there.
Great.
Great, thank you. All right, so I guess in this, to draw the interview to a close, if you want to take a few minutes to make any other closing statement, or if you have any other questions that you want to ask us.
So yeah, I'll ask the questions first. We've talked about doing an entry plan and getting feedback. What would I hear if I'm chosen and I'm doing the entry plan, I'm getting feedback from different stakeholders, what would I hear are the strengths of Scituate and what are the areas that people think need to be worked on?
I think the strength is the community support of the schools and their teachers, definitely. Yeah. We love our teachers and
And I would add to that.
yeah.
I would add to that too, Jim, and over the last few years, we've made a concerted effort to reduce class sizes, because I have a very simple theory of education. You hire great teachers and have small class sizes and you'll have good success. So we're very proud of the fact that we have reduced our class sizes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would echo Janice, our strength is really our community. I know that you had referenced, I think most school budgets are based upon, you go to the town and say, I want a 2% increase on last year or whatever it is. We have a different formula here and it's technically set on a certain percentage of a net number. So I think that based upon that number that we are given, it shows the support that the town provides to the schools. So that's an overwhelming strength of our district, and I think separates us. In addition to that, our teachers and staff have been amazing, and that's been exemplified over the past, what is it now, 3 weeks roughly, where they've had to transition their classroom learning to online. So I would say our staff and our community are probably the greatest strengths of our district. The weaknesses, I'll let someone else opine on the weaknesses.
Yeah.
Well, I think because our community is so caring about the school district, it's the transparency that they want. I know you spoke a lot about being transparent to in what you've shared to the school community and to the town. But I think that's just one of the things that, whether it's the budget or just some of the great things that our students are doing in the schools. I mean, we start every school committee meeting with something called Celebrate Student Success, which we started a couple of years ago. And each of the 6 schools, we have one school come to every school committee meeting, and the students present in front of the school committee and in front of the district leadership. So being able to share what our students do is a great thing that we can share out. But really having that transparency on here's what the curriculum is, here's how we're doing with MCAS scores or with our budget, will go a long way to having a solid relationship over the next couple of years.
Mhm.
And I guess we have to say our students are the strength of our district
Right.
as well.
One of the weaknesses is the same as all other 351 cities and towns, is that we have a finite budget, and nobody gets what they want, and it's up to the school committee and the superintendent to work hard to advocate for the schools, as well as the selectmen and the various branches of town government to work for what they think is needed. And it's a difficult process with limited funds. So we're
Yeah,
just like everyone else.
Always is, yeah. Janice, were you gonna say something?
No.
Oh. Yeah, my next two questions were more curiosity than anything. I noticed that, and maybe, I don't know if it's still the case, but it looked like you had to put in 2 separate applications to MSBA. Is that true?
Yes, because we have the two different schools.
So will they only accept if they accept both, or is it possible they would accept one and not the other?
Well, the plan is to consolidate. So we had to submit the SOI that described why, the needs of the schools and why they, the condition that the schools are in, both
Right.
schools are in, so.
They're
Well,
linked
yeah,
together.
you're correct, Jim. It's 2 projects. This is Peter. One project is to theoretically tear down 2 schools and consolidate into one. And then the second project is to add on to one of the existing elementary schools. So it's 2 separate submissions. And we can only, I believe you can only submit 5 years after, what is it? Is it 5 years after the original submission? So that is a challenge, certainly. The elementary schools are I don't want to call it a weakness. The condition of our elementary schools is a weakness,
Our
not what
buildings
goes on
don't
inside
show
of them,
our-
the conditions.
Right. It sounded like for what you're trying to provide, it doesn't give you the ideal space to provide the type of education you're looking to provide.
Right.
Yeah, we have 2 identical 1960 cookie cutter elementary schools that really don't meet the education we want to provide our elementary kids. So
Mhm.
So is
And
that
the,
Cushing and Hatherley?
Yeah.
yes, and Wampatuck has had some money put into it, and that's the one we want to enlarge a little bit, not a whole lot, but enough to make it more equitable with what we hope would be 3 good, solid elementary buildings.
Right. Because Jenkins is fairly new, right?
Jenkins is, yeah,
15 or 16,
20.
20? Is it?
Yeah, but it needs a new roof. It's old
And
enough to need a
windows.
new roof
and windows.
and windows. So I think roughly 20 years.
The other one was one of the initiatives it looked like you were trying to establish was getting feedback from your alumni. And
Oh.
has that started? And if it has, what kind of feedback have you been getting?
That started from the guidance department. They have an alumni Facebook page. And they're trying to, what they're trying to do is connect alumni with current students and, maybe foster like relationships or get feedback as to what it's like after graduation. Because everybody's experience is different. Not everybody just, goes right off to the 4-year school and gets a job and, lives happily ever after. So, but that's primarily run through the guidance.
Yeah, that was another one I was excited to see because you're always trying to figure, in the SMART goals, you're always trying to figure out, all right, how are we going to measure this? And how do you really measure how successful
Right.
the school district has been? And, I certainly thought about the fact that it's not what schools do our kids go to, it's how well do they do
Right.
Right,
after school, whether they're going to college or whatever they're doing. How well are they doing?
right.
And that's hard to find out.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, they had presented to us about that maybe, I don't even know, a while ago, maybe fall. I don't even know when it was, but they were kind of just starting the endeavor, but they had a really solid approach. So I'm kind of excited to see what they come up with as they keep doing the research. And
I think Peter and I.
yeah, maybe these two can answer.
Oh, yeah. Well, Janice and I are both Scituate High School grads.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can answer. You can provide the information.
Yeah, how successful are you?
I'm
Very interesting.
Look at us now. We got interviews on Thursday and
So that was all the questions I had. I guess the one thing I'd like to say is, again, thank you for this opportunity. It's been really great to get to meet you guys and get to know you, and know Scituate even more than what my research has provided. As far as my candidacy goes, I am extremely excited about this opportunity. I know I'm ready to be a superintendent to help move a district forward. I believe strongly that our core values match really well. I would welcome. I certainly hope that I get to continue in the process, and you do, even though it's only a virtual site visit. I would really be excited to have you meet the people that I work with, to get to know me through them. And I think that if you do, it'll be very consistent with what I've said. I can tell you that at all levels here in North Andover, the most common thing I've heard is when everyone knows that I've applied for this position, I'm a finalist, that good luck, Jim. Hope you don't get it. So,
And it's unfortunate, it's a virtual process this year, and it's very unfortunate, but I think we're getting a good sense of you and who you are, and I appreciate all your effort.
well, thank you very much.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you so much, Jim. It was nice talking to you again.
You too.
Thank you, and stay safe.
You too.
Thank you, Jim.
All right.
take care.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
I'm out.
Not yet.
See you tomorrow.
Oh,
Okay? Don't forget, you still have to adjourn.
I know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can hear you. I can hear you. I apologize.
Right.
I forgot about that.
Oh, man. All right, so before we adjourn, what is the process, Jim, for the next?
Yeah, I've been chatting with Kim during this, and we've updated the posting for tomorrow to include the correct. The
Okay.
phone number is the same. It's just the meeting code's different.
Yeah.
And when I set these up for the search committee, the meeting code was always my member ID with Zoom. But we never used it because everybody was logging in via video and you didn't have to enter it. I didn't realize that we had talked a little bit about, Peter had mentioned the enhancements that Zoom has done. Apparently, they automatically generate new meeting IDs unless I I specifically say no.
Oh,
So when these meeting IDs were in place, they Zoom updated them when they did their. Not that I'm offering an excuse, but I should have checked. But I think we will have it announced and distributed for tomorrow. Kim is sending another one of those.
I think people picked up on it too. We got to like
email
7.
distribution with the new. We've already developed the new agenda for tomorrow, or an updated
Yeah.
agenda for tomorrow with the correct meeting ID for tomorrow on that.
Okay.
All right,
So-
good. All right.
But we had a number of people on
Yeah, at
phone
the
tonight, didn't?
at the
right?
height, there were 26 members, 26 people in the room. Taking the 6 of you out, it was, so there was 20, at one point, the highest was 20 call-in people. And
That was better than the other night.
Yeah, so I think the word spread fairly
And that-
quickly.
Yeah, that happened at 6:34, so it was right after we started getting people the correct meeting ID. And whether that, because I posted it both on Scituate Connect and Scituate Monthly. I did it on both of them.
Good.
So,
All right. Anybody have anything else before we adjourn?
Nope.
No. Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to
I'll
adjourn.
move that we adjourn at 7:31.
All right.
Second.
Gate
Right.
second, or whatever.
Lindblom, yes.
Hayes, yes.
Randall,
Long
yes.
yes.
Does that count, Jim? They all said.
Everybody, yes.
Yeah.
okay.
5.
All right.
See you-
Thank
See you all tomorrow.
All right, good night.
Good night.